Hi, Stephen from Owner Disown, and I'm doing a smackdown between two desktop replacement gaming notebooks. I've got the Sage NP9873, which has the i7-7700K CPU, so a desktop CPU in this beast, and it has a GTX 1080. And we have the HP Omen X, and this has the i7-7820HK overclockable CPU. It's a mobile CPU, and also has a GTX 1080. So, I mean, pricing wise, this is was around about $2,800. This is around about $2,400. So there's a price differential. But to be fair, you can configure like the HP Omen and Alienware 17, MSI GT73VR, all the way up to around about the $3,000 mark, and to match this. So I want to see, typically, you know, is it worthwhile going for a mobile CPU or a desktop CPU to get any benefits in performance, temperatures, what is that like? And also, you know, of course, we'll have a look at the screen, keyboard and everything else. So first off, if we're looking at the size and weight, certainly the Sage is thicker. It's certainly a bit more beefier, and consequently it does weigh more. It weighs about 11.1 pounds versus 9.1 here, so it's about a 2 pound differential, just short of a kilo difference in weight. So if you're struggling to carry these things, you know, on your back, you know, perhaps you should get something a bit thinner. But, you know, to be fair, they're both pretty heavy. But that being said, I do carry them around, no problem at all. And in terms of depth, the HP Omen X, a bit like the Alienware 17, is deeper because it's got a hinge forward design here, some heat sinks, bigger heat sinks here at the back. So footprint wise, the HP Omen X is bigger. Screen, now they're both got 120 Hertz screens, which is nice, ideal, perfect for gaming. Resolution wise though, the HP Omen X here I have has a 1080p display, and I think you can get a 4K. The Sage 9873 here, and that has a QHD, so 2560 by 1440, and you can also get a 4K display panel on this. Now the big differential is this is a TN panel on the Sage versus IPS on here. So what does that mean in everyday performance? Well, in terms of the Sage is certainly much brighter. It's around about 271 lux on my light meter versus 238 on the HP Omen, and that does make a difference day to day. In terms of you know, if you're near a window and it's shining on it, it's certainly easier to see on the Sage. And in terms of backlight bleed, you'll see there's certainly a little bit more on the HP Omen. I'd say what you see on the TN panel of the Sage, it's more of like an LCD glow. I think the biggest difference is the motion blur, the response time. Now to be fair, it's hard to see, really normal, but if you're watching a fast action, you know, like one of these tests you do with a spaceship zipping along the screen, and you do it in slow motion, there is certainly a little bit more blur on the HP Omen, showing that the response time is not quite as quick as the TN panel. But to be fair, day-to-day gaming, you're not going to really notice. Color accuracy, they're pretty much bang on together. So if you're doing any artwork, photo work, video editing, that type of thing, you're not going to notice much difference at all. Now screen flex, you know, the Omen is pretty solid. You know, it's got an aluminium lid here, and that's pretty stiff. The Sage has more flex. It's ABS plastic, so it's a little bit more wobbly, but I wouldn't say that's is a deal breaker, but certainly more rigid on the HP Omen. And lighting wise, you get it's all configurable. The lighting on the back is the same, you know, for both using the software. Now the keyboards, yeah, this is a big differentiator, the keyboards. Of course, you know, majority of gaming notebooks to date have generally been membrane style, and the Sage is no difference. And it, you know, to be fair, it is still quite nice. I did like it. It's very similar to the Alienware keyboard, and you got a separate number pad and a decent distance of travel. Usual controls, and I do like that. Now but until you've tried something like on the HP Omen here, the mechanical keys are fantastic, and yeah, there's no going back. I mean, I love the clicking sound. That is great. I do like the fact that you got separate programmable macro keys here on the left hand side, and I like the bigger separate space between the keyboard itself and the number pad. And they both can be configured again using the lighting and the software. And but I do prefer the Sage's lighting. It's a little bit more subtle, whilst the HP is a bit brighter. But that's down to personal preference. Plus, you can also lower the brightness anyhow, so you know it's not that big a deal. And you can do the usual waves, patterns, and this type of stuff. So if you like that. Now, trackpads, I'd say, are pretty much identical. I mean, you know, scrolling and using the trackpad is the same on both. Very accurate. The mouse buttons are both separate and both quiet, and I like it. They're very, very responsive. The biggest difference, though, is the Sage does have a inbuilt fingerprint reader. So that's I do prefer that. Signing in is a lot quicker because the HP Omen doesn't have Windows Hello. You've got to type your password in. So if you're a speed merchant, fingerprint is the way to go. Now let's have a look at the ports. So at the back on the Sage we have an HDMI, a USB 3, and the power socket. Whilst on the Omen we have an Ethernet port, 2 Thunderbolt ports, a mini display port, HDMI, and a Thunderbolt 3. So on the right hand side on the Sage we have a USB 3 port, SD card reader, we have 2 Thunderbolt ports, 2 mini display ports, and the Kensington lock. On the Omen we've got SD card reader and a USB 3 port and the power connector. On the left hand side on the Sage we have 2 Ethernet ports, 3 USB 3 ports, and a series of headphone microphone jacks, the audio connections. And on the HP Omen we have a USB 3 and headphone and microphone jack. Now opening up and getting inside, and as you can see once you get in there, the Sage has better cooling. It's got 3 fans, it's got separate heat pipes for the CPU and the GPU, whilst the HP Omen shares those heat pipes. The Sage also has a MXM graphics card, so you know you can take them in and out if whatever you want, swap them. You can also have 2 GTX 1080s and SLI on the Sage, so that's huge. Whilst of course everything is soldered onto the motherboard on the HP Omen. You also get 1 extra 2.5-inch drive bay on the Sage, an extra M.2 SSD slot, so you can have 3 on here, and you've got 2 more RAM slots, so you can have actually 64 gigabytes of RAM on here. And it also has a subwoofer to help with the audio, which you don't have on the HP Omen. Testing the speakers, you've got about extra 8 decibels of sound coming out of the Sage, and it's helped because you've got some really, really big speakers here out at the back, which fire up, but they're really loud. Whilst on the Sage, I mean on the HP Omen, the little ones here are firing at the front. Alright, so looking at the BIOS on the Sage first. The main menu brings you all the information, general information about the ports, SATA ports, that type of thing. Clicking on the Advanced tab brings you to the chipset control, where you can alter such as the GPU scaling and Intel virtualization, that type of thing. You can also change the number of cores that are active. You can enable or disable the Thunderbolt activity, and also there's an overclocking option within there, so you can change the multipliers and the power limits. And even on the memory, you can choose a different memory profile. Now the BIOS on the HP Omen, extremely basic. You can't do anything. No overclocking options at all. So much better on the Sage. So comparing the software on both, first up on the Sage you have some good fan options, so you can create a custom fan and change it according to the temperatures. Whilst on the HP Omen there's no fan control at all. Overclocking on the Omen is much the same as any other bit of software. You can change the processor core ratio, the multiplier, you can alter some voltage, which is quite unique for this software, and also the processor cache ratio, which is a nice option to have. Whilst on the Sage, in addition to the CPU, you can overclock or change the timings and things on the memory. And on the CPU side, usual, changing the multipliers and altering the power limits and voltages. And in terms of out-of-box temperatures, the Sage CPU was cooler for sure. 86 degrees on using the auto fan, going down to 73 degrees Celsius using the max fan, whilst the HP Omen was about 92 degrees. So certainly warmer there. And this is because of those shared heat pipes. You know, as soon as the GPU gets activated, the HP Omen starts to get hot. The GPU wise, however, on the Sage gets much hotter. It's actually pumping around about 195 watts to the GTX 1080 here, compared to around about 165 watts on the HP Omen. So that difference of 30 watts does translate into higher temperatures. We're getting typically around about 90 degrees Celsius on the Sage versus on normal fan, and 82 with the max fan, compared to like 68 on the HP Omen. So that's a big difference. But I will be doing a video shortly where, you know, in fact, I have done a video already where you can undervolt the GPU. And if you haven't seen that, you know, click up here, and that did help. But I'm also going to do a video where I repasted the whole lot, and that's helped substantially as well. Now, of course, you can repaste the HP Omen as well. So let's take a look at this performance. And one thing we'll do quite often on these desktop replacements is perhaps converting one video file to another different format using perhaps an application like Handbrake, which loves faster CPUs, the clock speed, and also as many threads as you can throw at it, to be honest. The i7-7820HK on the HP Omen has a base clock of 2.9, turboing up to 3.9, whilst the i7-7700K base clock is 4.2, turbos up to 4.5. So certainly at stock, you know, there is quite a big difference. We're talking like 32 minutes on here versus 39 minutes, nearly 40 minutes on the HP Omen. But overclock the HP Omen to 4.5 brings it into line to what the base clock is on the Sage here. So you're talking around about 32 minutes, which is great, you know. Once you overclock the Sage, however, up to say 4.7 gigahertz, you can nearly break that 30-minute barrier. So, you know, you can push the desktop i7-7700K harder than you can the mobile version. So that is a benefit. Now, one interesting thing, throw in some GPU work at the same time. So for example, if you're playing a game and you want to do this video encoding in the background, you get a big hit using the mobile version here, certainly on this system, because of that shared heat pipes. So clocking this at 4.5 gigahertz and clocking this at 4.5 gigahertz, you will notice that the HP Omen downclocks to around about 3.1 gigahertz, and it averages 19.4 frames per second on the Handbrake, whilst the Sage with the desktop CPU maintains that high clock rate of 4.5 gigahertz, averaging 24.7 frames per second. So the end result is that this ends up being 25% faster than the HP Omen, and I think that is a major selling point for going for a desktop CPU in a laptop. So looking at Cinebench, the higher clock rate of the Sage will certainly does help. Certainly at stock, you're looking at 968 points versus 754. You know, but overclock the HP Omen up to about 4.5, you'll get 954 points. So that brings it in line again to the Sage. But of course, you can overclock the desktop CPU on here a little bit more, and that pushes it over the 1,000 mark. Looking at some synthetic benchmarks like TimeSpy for gaming, you know, they're both pretty similar. You do get some benefit at stock configuration because of the faster CPU in here. But overclock again the CPU on the HP Omen, it you know, it gets close to the 7,000 mark, and you know, overclock the graphics card as well. So if you do that in both, you're both around about the 7,000 mark, which is a great score. Now looking at Battlefield 1, now Battlefield 1 does actually quite like fast CPUs, particularly at 1080p. So bearing that in mind, the desktop i7-7700K on the Sage here does help it. Even at stock clocks, we're talking like 115 FPS versus 108 on the HP Omen, and overclock it, we got 133 FPS. That's overclocking the GPU and the CPU, 133 compared to 111. So that's a big difference at 1080p. Rise of the Tomb Raider, it wasn't quite like that. It was, you know, it's bit more graphically intense, I believe. You know, it's very similar, very close. Couple of frames per second between them both, so not much to go at there. And Witcher 3, again at stock clocks, you know, everything was pretty much the same, about 80 frames per second. And the Sager did power ahead a little bit with the overclock, but again, not by much, say you know, 5% or so. So not a huge difference there. Now, interestingly, Doom, I was expecting a bit more of a performance gap here, but likewise, they performed very similar. You know, about 160 to 165 frames per second. I mean, to be fair, that's pretty fast. And finally, let's have a quick look at the battery life. Now, this is where the Omen really comes into its own. 4.5 hours of battery life versus the Sage's 2.5 hours, which, to be fair, is still not bad for something this powerful. You know, 200 watts to that GPU, still getting it a good old 2.5 hours. So, you know, at the end of the day, which one do I prefer? Well, I think I do prefer the Sage. I like going for, you know, the more performance. I love the louder speakers. I think the screen is great. You know, it's fast, and I also like the fact that you know, you can take the CPU out, you can delid the CPU, and you know, make it all cooler. You got more expandability, with the extra you know, 2.5-inch drives and the M.2 bays and stuff. So I think all in all, this is great. And I've also got one with the i7-8700K CPU, and so that's a 6-core CPU, and I'll be doing a review on that shortly. And I'm telling you now, that is fast. Just from the testing I've done, that is great. So, you know, going for a desktop CPU and a laptop, I think, to me, is a no-brainer if it's about a similar price. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thumbs up, subscribe. See you next time.